Hello, I'm Sonia Usatch-Kuhn, your host. Welcome to Poets on Poetry. I will be speaking with members of the North Carolina Poetry Society, discussing the myriad components needed to process the writing of poetry. My guest today is Catherine Carter, a professor of English at Western Carolina University in Cullowhee, North Carolina. Her terminal degrees include a PhD in English and a North Carolina teaching license in English language arts. On a good day, she can requeen a hive of honeybees and roll a whitewater kayak. On less good days, she collects stings, rock rash, and multiple contusions. As the sticker on her office door says, she likes poetry, long walks on the beach, and poking dead things with a stick. Welcome, Catherine. What kind of dead things, and do you write about them?
Thank you so much for having me, Sonia. Um, uh, my father is a biologist and my mother is a master gardener. So really just about any dead things, beetles, armadillos, roadkill of all sorts. And sometimes I write about them. But really, most things are more interesting alive than dead.
Okay. So I couldn't resist that. Too many items to prompt you. So you are the recipient of the North Carolina Governor's Award for Excellence in Teaching. Tell us about your career at the University of Cullowhee, where you teach both English and English language arts. And well, two-part question. What's the difference and to whom do you teach which?
The only real difference in that terminology is that we call it English studies at a university and English language arts in the public schools. So I began at Western Carolina University in Cullowhee. We are one of the 17 UNC campuses. And I began there as contingent faculty in 1999, but I shortly thereafter got interested in English education, which means that I grow little English teachers. And that is where the English language arts connection comes in. I went back to school post PhD and got a North Carolina teaching license so that I could work in teacher preparation. And our teachers are really some wonderful human beings.
So when you teach them language arts, is poetry part of it?
It is.
Tell us how you work it in.
Well, I work a lot in teacher preparation, so I try to teach young teachers to handle poetry without intimidating students too much. I think it is probably a dangerous practice to begin with the most difficult poetry we can find, Shakespeare, and give the impression that poetry has to be especially difficult to be especially good. I don't think that's true. I like to start students, either college students or public school students, with very short poetry by kids to show them that people like them also write poetry.
Okay. Have some of your students started to like it and write it? The public school people.
Well, I'm usually only there in a public school setting for a day or two, so I cannot speak to that thoroughly. But some of my own college students do indeed write poetry. And in fact, Western Carolina is just about to have its annual Spring Literary Festival, which includes literature contests for young creative writers from the school system. And I think we had around 100 poems turned in. So clearly, some young people think poetry is quite manageable.
Contest? Did they enter these poems, these 100 poems?
Yes, public school students submitted quite a lot of poems to our Literary Festival Poetry Contest. In fact, we have just finished judging that contest this past week, and there were a lot of very exciting poems in there.
So what I asked was, were you allowed to bring one of those submitted poems as an example to this podcast of the
No,
No, you did not.
we have
Okay.
not announced the winners yet.
Oh, well, we can't preempt that. Okay. So the parts of a poem, focusing on inspiration and imagination. How did you introduce the poetry to the high schoolers and the college people as well?
Well, many people, I think, begin writing because they want to express feelings. And don't we all? I think
Yeah.
everyone wants to be heard and understood. But we often begin with the idea that that we can most effectively express our feelings by naming the feelings, by using abstract nouns, love, pain, hope, fear, heartbreak. And those words cover so many kinds of feelings that they wind up saying almost nothing. When we speak of love, the feelings we have for our parents are very different from our spouses, children, nieces, friends, students. And so it is the concrete language, the vehicle of the metaphor rather than the tenor, which is apt to be individual and original. And the funny thing is that that is what makes the work universal. It's what makes people say, yeah, wow, I never would have thought of it that way, but that's the way it is. So I tend to work a lot with concrete imagery, no matter with which poets I'm working.
Now let's talk a little bit about your books, because they are somewhat unique as they refer to larvae, swamp monsters, gills, and witches. I would ask you to please talk about these topics and which techniques, metaphor, personification, etc., do you employ when writing a poem? And then, of course, after your explanation, please do read a few.
Thank you. Um, these titles are not quite as arcane as they appear. The memory of Gills refers to the fact that when we are embryos in the womb, we we go through a process, what they call in biology ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, which means that for a very brief period while we are embryos, we actually have gills and tails. We have this very kind of primal connection to the non-human world. And that is what the memory of gills refers to, the kind of invisible or half conscious memory of what it is like not to be human at all, because my poems tend to be very much concerned about with human connections to what is not human. The swamp monster at home is a line from a poem called The Body, and it is about the way that we tend to the way we tend to treat and feel about our physical bodies, sometimes as if they were monstrous, but it's really rather a comforting poem. It envisions the body as the swamp monster sitting at home watching the soaps, having cocoa. But I used the swamp monster in particular because it's a plant monster. It's very much well, I was thinking of the swamp thing, but I was worried about copyright, so I said the swamp monster. But this is a monster which is kind of an eco warrior, kind of like poison ivy in the DC universe. And larvae of the nearest stars, it is of course a line from a poem, and I can read it if you would like. But we are the larvae of the nearest stars. Everything we are on Earth was created basically out of the material of stars. Carl Sagan remarked on this a long time ago, that we are stardust. So there is the line from the poem, which is about copepods, little water creatures. But in a broader sense, it's about our connection to everything, that we are all made of the same materials.
Well,
Remind me what the next question was.
well, I invite you to read from
Mhm.
your book. Whichever
Yes.
whichever one you prefer.
Well, and you had asked about which techniques I think I use in poems, and the answer is most of them. I think, like most poets, it really depends on what a given poem seems to require. Once I get an idea or a line, sometimes I will begin writing in prose and later work out the lineation depending on what it sounds like the lines want to be. There is a an artist locally who builds birdhouses and kind of anonymously posts them on local trails. And he says he listens to see what the wood is telling him as to what kind of birdhouse he makes. They're very inventive. They have all these different kind of structures and things. And I think it is like that with language as well. Writers are trying to kind of hear what it wants to be and try to make it that as much as possible.
I like what you said about writing it out in prose and then doing the lineage, um, because I believe that a poem is the shortest short story ever. Once we remove everything that doesn't leave it to be a poem. So,
Perhaps so. Certainly with narrative poems, there is a story.
yes. Well, please honor us with your choice.
Um, okay, this is a poem from the Larvae of the Nearest Stars book. It is called Late to the Party, and I wrote it at a workshop, and it arose from finding myself saying early in 2017, as it happened, that people like me were coming late to the party of outrage. And I don't really know where that came from, but once you say something like that, you kind of have to think, what's it like at the party of outrage? Who's there? Who's very much not there? What kind of snacks do they serve? And like a lot of common expressions, it was a metaphor, but the interesting part is the vehicle, the actual party of outrage. So to write it, I had to create what I sincerely hope is a considerably worse version of myself to attend this party. And I provided myself with a couple of fictional friends.
Oh, charming.
Uh, Wilhelm, late to the party. It's not much of a party, though some of the people are beautiful, their songs throbbing deeper than rivers, their door grates scrolled with an iron tree of life. Few really want to go to the party of outrage, all that ugly knowledge baked into the crackers like arsenic, dissolved in the water like lead. It's been going on 500 years or 10,000. Everyone's tired. The toilets are all stopped up. The crowd surge thick as blades of dying grass. A fire of chairs reeks and smokes on the bathroom floor, where a man in fatigues clutches himself in his arms, choking back whimpers. Stacked against the wall are half-sized coffins. One woman, her ankles fluid puffed and her eyes blazing with veins, holds another, who is weeping softly with exhaustion. Like two great trees propping each other up, black walnuts, tulip poplars, they keep standing, no place to sit down. We are late to the party and reap cynical glances. Only now? Madison makes remarks about how things are done here. A crack on the kitchen table, no Pinot Grigio. Slits her eyes at a teenage boy shrieking curses out the splintered window. Tiffany whispers that she doesn't feel very welcome, while a tattooed girl with a rope burn on her neck rolls a black eye. I think that despite my outrage myself, I could really stand a night off. Watch Special Victims. This isn't the only party in this burning city. Not for us, not yet. When we leave, swearing we'll be back tomorrow, no one follows. This is where they live.
Charming. So like, you mixed a lot of very good information into that. You really described what's going on in that living room. I enjoyed it. I believe we have time for one more and then a love poem.
Okay. Yes. Mm, I think this, yes, this is another one from the larvae of the nearest stars, and it is called Fairy Tale, and it asks a lot of questions, fairy
Okay,
tale questions,
okay.
questions, to which the answers are unlikely to be easily found. What if hope weren't a treacherous ghost of all you'd lost, always drawing away at the exact pace of your desperate forward crawl? What if better were ever coming? If there were someone to help lug the feet of the corpse you have to drag and drag by its softening armpits, and all you had to do was hold off, quitting or killing yourself another few days, another few years? What if you found yourself with time to paddle bright rivers and your kayak roll was all right, not perfect, but enough to heave you upright again, to save you from drowning? Forget seeing the beloved dead again in some ragged orchard of long autumn grass, sassafras berries dropping blue-black from their scarlet cups, the fallen oaks unfelling themselves, your river fit to drink again, the lost freshwater mussels creeping back home, each on its one slow foot. Forget being absolved or even forgotten by the people you once hurt. Forget ever seeing him again. No one's talking about heaven. I'm talking about what if your dreams weren't always bad? Would you know what to do with them? What if it turned out you were nearly good enough after all? And who knows,
Yeah, I need
perhaps
a
some
minute.
much
I
later.
need a minute. That one. All right. So, one more, the love poem.
The love poem. Yes.
I think that we need a little love with all the things that are going on in the world today. I think I think it's
Mm,
necessary.
yes, perhaps. I agree. This is maybe not the love poem you want for that. It is called Semile's Story. It is based on a tale from classical mythology. I based it on Ovid's version in the Metamorphoses. As you know, Zeus is the king of the Greek gods, and that is in part because he is the embodiment of the lightning. He rules his people and his sometimes dysfunctional family through the kind of total power the lightning represents. He also wasn't a very faithful husband, and he had a lot of human lovers, whom his wife Hera blamed for his philanderings, and things never changed.
I
Uh,
would,
that
I have to agree with you.
Well, one of these was Semele, and she is famous because Hera tricked her into asking Zeus for a favor she did not name. So he agreed to grant the favor, and then she told him what it was. Come to me as you come in love to Juno. That's Hera. And the gods can take a lot more passion than mortals can, and it did not end well for Semele. Um, and perhaps, who knows, the story may have inspired AC/DC's classic song Thunderstruck, but I cannot really speak to that. So this is a poem about what it means to ask to be loved by the thunder. Semele's story. She was flash fried like a sweet potato. She sparkled and spat sparks. She was blinded in that blind river of power pouring down the sky. The blue-white ozone arc welded her flesh to the floor. No more, she might have cried, too late, as the electrical call illuminated her face, lashes and teeth flickering, as fit to split the sky, he groaned as he came, in grief or pleasure. And she died, too late. She had said what she said. Come to me as the thunder. Prodded by a jealous wife, it is true, but she knew. We say it too. Batter my heart, or anyway, some part, said one whose name meant give. And when the gift batters us half dead, well, we said what we said. what she said to Zeus, and most of us to the world, and I sometimes to you. I don't care. Let me know. Come as the thunder. Sometimes the world does. And sometimes you see these burns, you do.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing with us. And you bring another level of poetry to the podcast.
I certainly appreciate your having me. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're most welcome. So I have a little quote here that I thought would be kind of apropos about your own material. And it's an inspirational quote from Masaoka Shiki. Take your materials from what is around you. If you see a dandelion, write about that. If it's misty, write about the mist. The materials for poetry are all about you in profusion. And that sort of reminded me of all your, larvae and, and all of the things that you write about. So thank you again. You've been listening to Poets on Poetry. This is Sonia Usatch-Kuhn, Rashawn Media, Peter Rashawn, producer.